Today I am testifying on behalf of the Lake Poncet Water Project District. During my testimony, I probably will use the word we. When I say we, I mean the district, or I may use the word district, but I probably will not keep repeating Lake Poncet Water Project District.
And what is the purpose of your testimony today?
The purpose of my testimony today is to explain and expound on the report that myself and Dr. Burkhardt prepared entitled Investigation of Lake Poncet Water Quality and Quantity Concerns. And this is supporting documentation for our request for the amendment for flood control permit number 5 and our application for our water rights.
Now, when you say that you and Dr. Burkhardt drafted this investigation, which section specifically did you personally deal with?
I looked at the general geology, geography, the surface water hydrology. I looked at the surface water, the structures, we'll be discussing Boswell and the flood control structure, and the interaction between or the hydrologic budget, I should say, for the particular for the Lake Poncet Basin.
And were you personally involved with the application process, the drafting of the applications that have been submitted to this board?
Yes, I was. I was involved in both helping or assisting with the application of the flood control, or the amendment to the flood control permit, and with the application for the water right.
And how did you go about drafting these applications and formulating them for the board?
Okay, what I did was early on I contacted Mr. Eric Grunman of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to ask him just procedurally how I should go about doing this. And during our conversation, what we talked about was that amending flood control permit number 5, and then I asked the question, do we need to, as the district, do we need to go ahead and file for a water right? And the advice I was given was that probably the best or the cleanest way to approach that would be to ask for a flood control, for a water right as well, even though the water we are asking for is the natural flow that would have occurred into Lake Poncet had the structure not been there. So that was my concern about, do we really need to have a water right permit? But based on the advice of DENR, that was our process or procedure that we followed.
Now, obviously, you mentioned Lake Poncet. That is the lake that we're here to deal with today. During the course of your investigation, I assume you learned some aspects about Lake Poncet. Could you please just describe the lake itself and a brief history of it to the board so they're familiar with the area that we're dealing with?
Okay, I have 2 posters here. This is an aerial view of the Lake Poncet and just the close-in area. And then, if it's all right, I will simply use this poster, which is, we have a similar poster back here, which is our exhibit, but it essentially covers the same information rather than moving posters around. What we have what we have
Could you identify the exhibit number up there?
Okay, it's DENR exhibit number 4.
Thank you.
The Lake Poncet watershed encompasses about 530 square miles. And it includes the lakes. We have Lake Marsh, Lake Norden, Lake Mary, Lake St. John, Elbert. Then we have these 2 sitting off to the side here, Badger and Thisted, although the connections are not real good from a surface flow. And then we go from Elbert, we go into Lake Poncet, and we have Dry Lake. And so that's our major lakes. If we total up the lake area, total lake area is about 17,200 acres for the watershed. In addition to that, we have about 1,500 acres of wetlands and small ponds and depressions where water can be trapped. If we look at Lake Poncet itself, the watershed for Lake Poncet, or that water that would flow directly into Lake Poncet, is about 190 square miles, so a somewhat smaller area. Now, this drainage area is going to become important as I go through my testimony. Basically, the drainage flows basically then from, we go from, and there's arrows on here similar to what we have. We go from Lake Marsh down to Lake Norden, down to Lake Mary, St. John, Elbert. We get a little bit here coming in from the south. Then the flow goes into Lake Poncet and flow coming in from Dry Lake. I would at this time like to introduce another exhibit because we're talking about, let me just put this one up here. Again, this is our aerial view, and let me just put this one up, which is just showing the relationships between these lakes. Now, I indicated there's about 17,200 acres of lake. When we look at Lake Poncet area is about 7,800 acres. I would like to say it's the largest lake in South Dakota. Unfortunately, due to the high precipitation that we got in the 90s, Lake Thompson's overtaken that. But for a number of years, Lake Poncet was the largest natural lake in South Dakota. So we can look at this cross section, and this will show some of the relationship here. We got marsh up here.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
These have all been exhibits now that have been numbered on it.
I don't have it.
I think that's application number 6.
Okay. I apologize. There's no number on here to give you.
But we need to have that so the court reporter can,
All right.
and the record can be clear on it. So
Yes,
what you're discussing now is applicant 6.
Yes, sir. This is the spill elevations as we look at it, as that water moves down through the system. And it flows from Marsh to Norden to St. John, Elbert, Dry Lake, Lake Poncet. There's something interesting when you note this. If you just take a look here, this is an interesting watershed for a number of reasons. One of them being that if you notice the spill elevations, generally you go from higher, lower, 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 and lower, and out to the Big Sioux. If you take a look, Lake Poncet's spill elevation is at 1650.5. Lake Elbert's spill elevation is 1650.2. St. John's is 1649.5. So we have flow potentially going in both directions. We have a very complex hydrologic system from the surface standpoint in this particular watershed. Now, for this relationship now with the Big Sioux, you'll notice that the Big Sioux has an elevation of approximately 1647. It was also interesting to note that the bottom of Lake Poncet is actually below the bottom of the Big Sioux River. So water would naturally, under higher flow conditions, as this moves up, it's going to flow backwards. This is what we'll call the inlet-outlet channel to Lake Poncet. And we've got arrows going in both directions. And pretty much everybody shows arrows in both directions, including the DENR number 4 exhibit shows arrows in both directions, indicating that water would naturally, had the structure, the flood control structure number 5 never been placed, would have flowed naturally back and forth into and out of Lake Poncet, and potentially even doing a little bit of recharge further up.
Now, Mr. Emmons,
Yes.
You had mentioned that the inlet-outlet structure for waterway allows water to either come into or leave Lake Poncet. What was the natural state of that inlet-outlet prior to any intervention by man?
Okay. Before intervention